We're going to move to cloud security because this is really one of the areas and just using the cloud that we all are going to be faced with, if not already. All university systems have some component of cloud that they are either fully integrated with or going to. And they're doing this for a lot of reasons. It's convenience, but it does force a question of security. It helps with scalability and cost and everything else, and everybody just loves it. So I'm 50-50 on it. I love it and I don't, because it gives the potential of putting everything out in a way that outside of the castle that makes it a little bit more difficult to control. So this is a two-part question, but should educators embrace the cloud? I think they probably should, but if they do, how do we make sure that that cloud is secure, monitored to the same level or better than we could internally to make sure that it's safe?
Well, in all of the schools that I work with, we're always balancing between our ability to manage services on premises, things that we would do, versus cloud. And so we really have moved a lot of things to cloud or SaaS. And usually the determining factor is the functionality of a cloud service better than what we could provide? Is the security of that service better than we could provide? And again, scalability. So I think one of the things, I don't remember where I was going to talk about this, but maybe unlike some other institutions, we seem to have budget to buy tools, but not necessarily to bring on additional staff. And so it's easy to buy lots of tools that generate lots of traffic and alerts and things, and then not enough staff to actually react to them. So part of the way we decide to do something on the cloud is to say that for a particular service, it seems much more likely that Microsoft or somebody else has invested in their ability to respond quickly to security incidents. And if we were managing those services on premises, my example, and not asking for sympathy, but we manage 50,000 accounts, and I have 2 system administrators. So are those 2 guys going to be able to react when something happens in managing a service that large? Absolutely not. On the other hand, there are other services that either for the reasons of, we want something that's truly custom to the way that we do business, something that we can't replicate with a SaaS or a cloud-based system, or something that, truly is kind of keys to the castle, things that we want, we're not yet comfortable with putting in the cloud. So it's always a balance. I think one of the things, we have a unique situation that we have some K through 12 programs. We have a virtual high school, and then we have some charter schools as well. And one of the things I've seen, at least at the charter school level, which is interesting because our level of governance over them is different from the universities, is that they initially made heavy use of freemium cloud services. Freemium being, the free version of Google Apps or the free version of almost anything. And their value proposition for that is, wow, it's free, it's very, very high functionality, and then not aware at all of what the implications of that freemium model is, whether they're reusing your information for some other purpose. Often they're looking at a tool that really isn't tailored at higher education, and so FERPA and other kinds of concerns aren't addressed. I think the other thing with cloud, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, was you need to understand or think about what it means when you go with a cloud solution that may change owners over time. So you buy it and it's owned by company X, and next week it's owned by company Y, or it goes down, right? What did we see yesterday? Vine. They turned off Vine overnight. That's not an example where you probably have PII in the system, but there are those cases where data destruction is important, understanding that, being certain what they're going to do with your data if they change owners. Or I think there's even cases where if a company is going out of business, they will sell contact information as a way of covering some of their outgoing expenses. So looking at all of those and understanding what the implications are. I think real quickly, the other piece is and I was guilty of this in the beginning too, is really reviewing contracts when you're doing a cloud service. I mean, you can make assumptions that, hey, I'm going with Microsoft or somebody else. They obviously are doing more than I would ever do. They're going to take care of me, but maybe that's incredibly naive. I think doing some sort of a security review of those cloud services. You can look at their SSAE 16 reports, that sort of thing. There's always a section in that report that talks about customer responsibilities, and I think it's really important that you understand what those are, and that you review those on an ongoing basis, because cloud services tend to change their T's and C's all the time, and depending on new owners or new functionality, they might have implications on your data that most people don't pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely contracts and policies are a big part of making sure that if you use the cloud, you're doing it in a way that's safe. And it's entirely possible to use it in a fairly limited way. As, in acceptable use policies, set up what it's appropriate to put in the cloud and what isn't appropriate to put in the cloud. Because if you have, say, HIPAA, FERPA, or whatever the various acronyms are, information that would be restricted under that, you obviously don't want to be putting that into a cloud where you haven't, gotten a good sense of what data they can see. Like, is it encrypted end to end, or is it just, encrypted in some magical way that they do, and they have, visibility into keys, that sort of thing. And yeah, having acceptable use policy where it's everything is very clearly delineated so that everybody knows what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do, what's going to happen if they do what they're not supposed to do. And it definitely, it's a benefit and loss sort of scenario. Is like you do gain a lot of convenience, the potential for convenience, but you also have a lot more possibility of losing data, or just it's out of your hands. Cloud is a fancy way of saying someone else's computers. You're putting it in someone else's hands, and you need to have clear visibility into what your responsibilities are, what their responsibilities and abilities are, and kind of do your own due diligence to make sure that it's up to a level that's acceptable.
The cloud gets basically, in my view, it's if the cloud is got highly sensitive information, it becomes a larger risk. In some cases, we have these little API hooks into some of the big providers of Box and Citrix and ShareFile and OneDrive, so that certain file types can be extracted out of that, so we can give it to students, and then we can log on and pull it out, and it could be a constant scan. And so there are tools to do that even. But the best practice, I think, is to not put highly confidential things in the cloud, at least until there's a better, more secure cloud.
Or just, there are options out there that will allow you to be the one who's in control of the keys. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then, you adjust your policies accordingly.
Yeah. I'm just a couple things. Multi-factor, I'll just keep throwing that out there. I mean, that is good for cloud services as well. I think there's some other risks that aren't necessarily about security of data. Cloud services change over time, SaaS applications especially, and that I used this example earlier, but we have Blackboard in the cloud, but it is our own instance. And so if Blackboard decides to add a new functionality on a Friday, we can say no, postpone it. But then we also have, Oracle tools where, hey, Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, we get some update that we either weren't aware of or didn't plan for, and it breaks things, right? And so you have to think about what your change management process is, even when you're dealing with something like a cloud solution. I think that's a big risk that a lot of people don't think of, because I think these things are sold as, turn it on and forget it, right?
Yep.